Hello and welcome to Shoot the Shit, a podcast that tells the unfiltered tales of filmmakers' craziest on-set and production experiences.
Because every shit situation on set makes for a great story after. I'm Kristen, a director and editor.
And I'm Taylor, also a director and editor. This week we're talking to Alex Stamm. He is a producer and art director. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Taylor. Hi, Kristen. How you doing? Good to see you.
Good. How are you? Good to see you again. For those of you who don't know, Alex and I, we went to film school together. We were roommates for a period of time and then neighbors for quite a while, and have still stayed friends and colleagues through filmmaking and all of its shit show experiences. So thanks for talking to us.
We've seen a lot from film school to being roommates throughout that, and then also working together on quite a few projects as our careers kind of developed. So yeah,
yes,
you're very familiar with my shit shows. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, like so many times we would just like sit on your couch and just, you know, have a glass of wine or something and just kind of like revel in the craziness that it is to work.
After some of these experiences, it was a bottle of vodka and 4 bottles of wine because
maybe a few
there's a lot of trauma.
A few cigarettes.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah. I love those times. I feel like maybe that we've just created a whole podcast around that whole experience. You know, it's a little cathartic and therapeutic to do stuff like this. So I'm really excited for you to share, some of the stories that I've heard, maybe some I haven't. So yeah, why don't you tell us about what it means to be an art director, what your role is on set in doing that, and just, give us a little bit more context in that.
Absolutely. So I art direct. I also produce. I helped kind of develop a division of a marketing firm during the pandemic, which was fairly successful. And throughout that, then I've continued to produce things from many different varieties on having to do with ad sales and stuff like that for some of the big corporations. Right now I'm at Sphere, which is in Vegas, but I'm in LA. And so no shit show stories there yet. That's been great. But other than that, I also generally art direct for television. Kind of depends on what the climate is in the industry. And art directing is basically I'm responsible for everything that you see in the camera, anything you see in the frame. So making sure that the sets are built, set decorated, and dressed, and that everything is cohesive and in line with the story that's being told, so that we're making sure that the wallpaper matches what the character would have in their actual house, or that there's an ashtray with 50 half-smoked cigarettes for a stressed out, mom who maybe, is going through some sort of terrible experience. So basically, we make sure that all the things that you see are in line with what the story tells. Yeah.
Very nice.
Alex, I've heard you have quite a few stories to share with us, so I'm really excited to hear some of those. You mentioned something about an art prison or a project called Art Prison, so please do tell.
Yeah, so this was actually, I believe I did Art Prison while we were still in school, Kristen. I can't remember exactly, but it was either right after or during.
That's right. Yeah,
so
yes, I think that's right.
Art Prison was a pilot for a network. I'll leave the network out of it, so because it wasn't their fault. It was such a shit show. It was the production companies. But Art Prison was a pilot that took place in an actual prison. So, of course, therefore, we had to shoot in a prison. So they decided that Palmdale was a great place for us to shoot in.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, it does happen a lot. It's affordable. It's also probably one of the only places with an inactive prison, which I actually believe that prison's now active again. So that's even weirder. But Miraloma, I think, is the prison, was not active at the time, and that's where we went to shoot the shit show. And we got there, and I mean, there's so many details. I don't even know where to start. I mean, I guess I can start with where we stayed. They put us up at a motel. There's no real like great hotels in Palmdale. It's pretty much motels. They put us up in a motel that was run by I would say, kind of conservative lady in her 80s, had the skin tone of someone in a coffin, you know, that nice, perfect tinge of green. And was as if it had not been a day past 1954. She refused to. Well, first of all, we had to bunk two to a room, which is also like, I think nowadays most productions will not do that because it's also kind of like, that's not really how you should do things. So we had to bunk. So she refused to allow boys and girls to bunk in the same room, which to us was very frustrating. And also I was like, ma'am, as a homosexual male, I think that you would rather me be bunking with the opposite sex. And
that's so strange. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying she did not like that because, well, 1954, homosexuality was not popular either. So we were off to a bad start.
But that's such a strange thing for her to enforce. First of all, like as a motel manager, like what happens if there's like a married couple or something? I don't know. That's a little strange that she would not allow.
Got to show that marriage certificate, you know?
Yeah, I think Taylor's nailed it. I think you had to prove. I think she knew we were a film crew, and I imagine that we weren't the first film crew to ever stay at this best, you know. And I'm sure she probably had experienced some weird things happen. I don't know. I mean, as you all know, film production's weird, and it only gets weirder when you're on out of town shoots in remote locations. It's like people act like they've never completely uncivilized. But that hotel was motel. That was not even the worst part of the motel. The motel, it wasn't like it felt clean. You know what I mean? It wasn't like completely, absolutely disgraceful. But we going to bed at night, all of a sudden we would hear in the walls. Yes, God. Kristen, your face says it all. And so we came to discover that there were cats living in the walls. So
cats or rats?
Cats, wall cats.
What?
Yep. So every night when we were already exhausted after what probably was 12 to 16-hour days, come back, you know, crawl into our mediocre beds, and then try to fall asleep to little kittens running through the walls. So, yeah. Wild.
That'd be unnerving. I would not be a fan of that. Not a cat person.
Yeah, it was not great.
Walls.
Yeah, no one wants cats in the walls. No one wants anything in the walls.
No.
It sounds like an episode of Hoarders.
Yes, it was. Well, yeah. I wouldn't actually be surprised if the manager lady was a hoarder at her own personal house. She definitely had that vibe. There was definitely some weird things going on.
Person hoarder vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. But then it only gets weirder. Of course, you know, we had to bring everything in from Los Angeles. We completely had to dress this prison. It pretty much was empty. So we spent a lot of time in there, and we spent a lot of time, because it's a prison, with the warden. Even though it's unoccupied, there's still a warden. And the warden, I can't remember his name now. Oh, God. He was a wild man. He was very, 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 very obsessed with his grass. He had a very large pride that in the middle of the desert, in a place where drought is running rampant, that he had this beautiful prized lawn in the middle of a prison. So much so that, of course, prisons are large, so everyone had golf carts so that we could get around. So we're standing there once, and he is in his golf cart, and we see him like speeding onto the lawn, and we can't figure out what's going on. And we look and we see there's a gopher that has come out of the ground. Well, as you can imagine, gophers aren't great for lawns. And this sheriff, warden man, did not want this gopher messing with his lawn. So he ran over the gopher and yeah, and didn't just keep going. He did that cartoon thing where you stop, reverse, go, reverse, go, reverse about 5 times in front of like probably 30 crew members. And we all were just like,
this is like a murderous rampage.
Yeah, he just went, I was like, sir, you are unhinged. You are the one that should be in prison.
This is like some Caddyshack stuff.
No, it was
God.
absolutely terrifying and horrific. And I was just like in utter shock. I couldn't, like, I didn't even know how to handle that. So, and, you know, I mean, they let us, you know, kind of have our run around the prison. So like we could go anywhere, like maximum security, like, even though, I mean, no one was there, so there's no prisoners, but it was super strange. And it was like, you know, it's just prisons don't have great energy.
Was it creepy? Was it super
It was very creepy. Yeah. Yeah, they had like also like there was parts of it that were really old that dated back to like the 30s, you know, like one wing of it, specifically where the dentist was just like straight out of American Horror Story. It was just absolutely terrifying. Like the dentist chair that was there was still like from the 50s. Like you could have just walked in there and shot like American Horror Story Asylum without having to do any design work to it. Like it was just like ready to go.
Your art director brain is like, okay, we could use this for future projects.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, too bad we're not shooting anything that's remotely that, but instead we're shooting a weird story about a prison that decides to do an arts program to sell the art to get paid for fund. It was really, anyway. So the pilot did air on the network. They aired it at midnight on a Sunday, Monday morning, specifically because they did not want anyone to see it and did not want it to get picked up. It was so bad, but they had to air it because the showrunner was a pretty prolific and important showrunner. So by contract, they had to air it. They just put it in the worst possible spot.
So sabotaged it.
Ever basically. Air anything. Yeah, they sabotaged it. Which is, but I mean, honestly, truthfully, they would have had to like pay me a ridiculous amount of money to go back and do full series on that. Like I would have, there's no way. After that, I was like, I will never shoot in a prison again, which that's not true, but I will never shoot in a prison under those circumstances and with that production company again. Because it was a disaster. It's just, they did not have any idea what they were doing. They did not take care of people. They did not communicate well. It was just, they were constantly changing things last minute, which is, you know, when you're shooting a pilot, that's fine if you're, you know, large budget, you know, but this was not that. So there was no like throw money at the problem solutions. It was just us trying to figure things out and work, you know, 18, 20-hour days some days.
Damn, that's crazy. Those are long days.
Yeah, and also like I had a co-art director on this because it was a fairly large project. So I had a co-art director, and you know he grabbed my ass one day because I was wearing there is no cause because there's no excuse for it. But this was his validation to it, was that because I was wearing jean shorts with like holes and stuff like that, I was dressed like because I responded to it and said, please, you know, don't touch me without my permission. And he responded, well, you're dressed like a slut. Uh, and he was one of the only other males on the team. I predominantly work with women designers. That's just, and set decorators. It's just, I not for any specific reason other than that's just what my career has been. They all were like, all the other females that were working with me were absolutely just went berserk on him because they were like, that is crazy. What are you talking about? You can't touch someone and validate it like that and blame it on them. Like, anyway,
That's messed up. It's so messed up.
Good that they stood up for you too and like actually said what needed to be said.
Yeah.
It was really good. And truthfully, I think he had been problematic in a lot of ways. But that was the straw that broke the camel's back where none of us have ever worked with him again. Because someone yells at you, someone does something, disrespectful, you have a tendency to like give them another chance, or they make giant mistakes. Sometimes you'll give them another chance. But when it comes to something that is of that level, we kind of were like, okay, well, we can't support that and encourage that.
Did you have to continue working with him the rest of the shoot? Was that awkward?
It was, yeah. We did have to continue working with him. But at that point, we were like I think we had maybe 2 days left. And we were all just essentially in survival mode. You know what I mean? Like, let's just get through this and then never have to think about it again. Because it was brutal. It was just brutal. There was like, the art director and the other art director who did that and the designer were not getting along. So it was just, me and the set decorator were always just trying to like manage relationships and like do things that were like way out of our scope. Like we're here to make something look cool, pretty in story and world. We're not here to manage personalities and people's behaviors and things like that. So that was really disappointing and kind of, led us away from working with some people, that after that project. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, being in these stressful situations kind of show true colors on people, and you immediately start to recognize who you want to work with, who you would continue to work with, and who's like, yeah, they're on the call sheet, I'm probably not going to take this. But as far as this production specifically, do you feel like the majority of the craziness that went on set was specifically because of the people that you were working with and just, kind of butting heads with them or them butting heads with one another? Or were there more like technical issues that you like had to deal with as well?
It was what it is in production, and what I've learned in my facet of being a producer and also being an art director and doing anything from live events, massive live events where I've closed down Times Square, to, producing content for a giant sphere, to producing commercials for Amazon and major corporations and stuff like that. And seeing good versions and bad versions of these things. It's all about resources and expectations, right? So expectations are something that everybody has in a product when they're trying to deliver something. Now, success is whether those resources meet those expectations. So if you don't resource properly, then you don't meet expectations, and then that causes the ego of a human to kick in. And that's when you get to see people's really nasty sides, because they promise something that they can't deliver because they don't have the resources. And it's not always their fault, because budgets, things like that, but it is their responsibility to communicate what they can deliver within the resources that are provided to them in an appropriate way. And if you don't do that and say, yeah, I can give you the world, and you can't, it becomes a really, really, really sticky situation of, promising the world and not being able to deliver it.
Fair enough.
On that, sorry. Were you going to go?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Kristen.
On that note, specifically talking about being in sticky situations and not delivering, it kind of sounds like you were on another production where that happened with a rather large budget that got put on hold because they ran out of money.
Yeah. So so the movie is going to come out. So we'll start off with the good news is that they did finish the movie. I did not carry on to the second part because at that point, once they had figured it out, I had already moved on to another job. But what happened was we went in and we started prepping a film. A fairly decent budget, tier 3, still considered low budget tier 3, but tier 3 is anywhere up to $16.5 million. So, and we were at the top of that. We all went in and we prepped and we had really lovely UPMs. They were friendly. They were great, but they had no capabilities of setting boundaries or, providing expectation meets or things like that. So essentially what it was we would provide our budgets, all the different departments and as you do when you're on a fairly large show like that, you don't really try to hit a number. More so you start off by saying, this is what we need. And it's always way higher than what you can do it for, of course, right? Like our first round of budget was, I specifically work with a designer who is one of my closest friends, and I love her dearly. But she loves to print wallpaper. I mean, I'm telling you, if it was up to her, every single room and every single house would be wallpaper, and not just wallpaper, which would be somewhat easier, but custom printed wallpaper, which is just like outrageously expensive. And then going and putting wallpaper up in places is also labor intensive. So once again, on union shows like these, outrageously expensive. So we, present our first round budget and it's massive, absolutely massive. And, the UPMs are just like, well, you have to get it down from this. But we don't know how yet, because normally that's when we're supposed to be like, okay, cool. Well, then what does the director want to lose creatively? What's the story element that's not so important for us to focus on? Where can we make sacrifices? Let's talk this through. So we start talking this through and we start finding places to cut. But they essentially had approved our budget as is with the notation that we needed to make changes to it, which I've never seen that in my entire life. So at that point, we're spending money, way too much money. All departments are spending way too much money. But so before we've even started shooting, the production's hemorrhaging, and we're shooting at municipalities, right? So this takes place in like the Supreme Court. It takes place in a bunch of other big judicial courts in states and things like that. And we're in Atlanta. So Atlanta also at this point in time, as you know, it's a very popular place where Marvel shoots a lot of their stuff. So Atlanta has gotten pretty privy to the fact that people will pay a lot of money, right? So now all locations that you shoot at are charging outrageous location fees. I mean, I'm talking like $50,000 a day. It's actually quite marvelous how expensive it is. It's nearly extortion. But most Marvel films will pay it. These huge, massive films will pay it. Now we're not a small budget film, but we're not Marvel, so we can't. So we're trying to figure out how to do that, how to dress these sets properly. It also takes a lot of resources to dress a space that's the size of a Supreme Court, right? It's a lot of real estate to dress. So we start, moving forward, getting things ready, prepping. We shoot the first weekend. And we shoot, it's a municipality, and there's like maybe 6, 7 condors. And I'm talking like, it looks like our footprint on this film was larger than a Marvel shoot.
Now tell us what a condor is.
Okay. So a condor is it's like one of those big, it's got like a box with 4 wheels, and then it's got an arm that articulates, and it goes, 60, 80 feet in the air? I think,
like
right?
A giant version of a cherry picker.
Yeah, it's like a giant cherry picker, right? Exactly. And you put a bunch of lights on it so that you can shoot. So the reason why we had 6, 7 condors in this, and then planned for the next week of shooting as well in another municipality, was because the director did not want to block shoot. So we had to light these giant municipalities 360.
Oh my God.
For those of us who don't know, tell us what block shooting is. Explain what that means.
Okay, so block shooting is when you, instead of taking all the coverage of one actor, you go back and forth between talent. So that means in order to light it, in order to do that, if you're not block shooting, the best way to explain it is when not block shooting is if you're shooting 4 scenes in that municipality, right, you would do all of actor A's coverage for all 4 scenes, right? And so then you would light that actor, that scene, all that coverage for that. Then you would stop down, switch lighting around, and then light for the other actor, do all 4, so on and so forth. Instead, we were shooting scenes, and some directors, given this, they really hold on to this because it can hold performance, right? Performance, when if you don't block shoot, you're likely to get a better performance. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Because the actors can play off of each other a little bit more.
Right, but I mean, you just require the block shooting. The actors can still play off each other. It's just it's just the order you do it in. So I don't know. I guess maybe they're scared they'll wear their performance out. I'm not really sure what the actual expectation is, but you're switching back and forth between talent per scene, right, for coverage.
Yeah.
So, and there's just not enough time when you're doing a municipality to move lighting setups like that constantly, right? So instead, you light it 360, which is 6 or 7 condors to light a giant courthouse. And don't get me wrong, this is not on the fault of the DP either, or, really ultimately the director should have been, it's not super her fault. Like, there's not a lot of 100% faults in what happened. It's just no one really was watching the books closely and being like, you know what, if we continue doing this, we won't be able to afford, you know what I mean? There was just a lot of saying yes rather than saying, hey, do you want your movie to get made? Then we need to do this, that, and the other and figure out how to get creative about doing these things. So anyway, the moral of the story is before we even got to go into shooting the second week, and I'm saying they also paid to shoot that second week without us shooting that second week because we were all set. We had dropped off the condors. We were all about to go into it. And then the producers pulled the plug on the last minute. Because you were out of money or what? We didn't run out of money, but we had spent, I want to say, I don't know the actual number, but I want to say that it was, at least almost a half, maybe a little less than a half of the budget on prep and 1 week, one shooting week. Yeah.
And how long was it supposed to shoot for? What were they budgeted for? A 4-week shoot, 8 week?
We had 6 weeks. So we were,
6 weeks.
We had quite a bit to shoot. A lot.
Like I said, blown through a lot of money.
A lot of the money. So the producer made the call to pull the plug, send everyone home, and then shut down for a period of time. They did come back. The designer nor I went back to it. They decided to hire someone locally because they also weren't able to start over from that budget. They were able to get additional funding, right? And they were able to figure some things out, but they had to make even more sacrifices. Had it been originally planned well. So we didn't end up finishing the movie. I haven't seen it yet. I don't think it's out yet. I'm curious to see it. It's a really great story. That's why I was kind of bummed. And the designer was kind of bummed because we really loved the story. We really loved the director's vision for it. We just, there was just poor management to start, and so the money just got spent without any proper oversight, or without anyone actually like paying attention to what was going on, and just someone's just constantly saying yes. And it's like, it's also in our industry, like saying no is also not optimal, right? So it's like being solution based is kind of what you have to do. It's like, okay, cool, no isn't really going to work, but like, how about we try this, or how about we try that? And it never, for some of us, like for our department, we definitely worked in that way. We tried to like find savings and cut things and stuff like that. But ultimately, like, it just, other departments, they had just already blown through so much money.
It's frustrating when you put so much into something and then you have to pull the plug like that. And it's
it was what happens. It was super disappointing, because I really wanted to see it all the way through. Because like I said, I really loved the story, and I thought, our designs for it, or the production designers designed what I was working on helping her execute, were really, really beautiful, really solid, really good storytelling. And I thought, and that first week that we did shoot, the only bit we shot, it was beautiful. I mean, the DP shot beautiful stuff. I don't think the DP even went back. I think they completely, complete new crew. But the DP is a brilliant DP. It's just, it's the UPM and production's job to rein in creatives, Otherwise, if I was the DP and I had the option of 7 condors, fuck yeah, I'd have 7 condors. It's going to make it look like, you know what I mean? It's the production value, what it looks like. It's going to look like crazy good. There's so much control with that much resource, right? The more resources you have, the more you're able to control the environment, and therefore you're going to get a really great picture. But that being said, there's also really creative ways to achieve similar things. There's got to be that checks and balances to make sure that happens, so that you don't all of a sudden run out of money.
Did you guys all sense that this was going to happen? Were you all like, oh, wow, we're spending a lot?
Yeah. And we really, like I said, we tried to find resources, but we didn't have all the insight, or ways to kind of lower costs and find ways to be more efficient and stuff like that. I feel like everyone put in a good effort to that, but we didn't have that from the beginning. So it was already a little bit too late when we got to that point, So it just was like a perfect storm, and we just didn't have great leadership. And then they tried to bring in someone in the last minute to fix it and all that stuff. And then it all eventually fell apart. But they did finish the movie. So ultimately, the director got to finish her story. I'm sure it's going to be actually really great. And I look forward to seeing it. So I think it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, big shit show, but like no malintentions, it wasn't like, no one was trying to do the wrong thing. It just was like the perfect storm,
It sounds like it maybe had a happy ending in the end. We'll see how it turns out. But that's definitely a fun story. I'm curious to move on to our next one. You had kind of mentioned something about a dune buggy that definitely piqued our attention. So you want to transition into that one?
Yeah. So this is actually, the last 2 stories were things I art directed. This was something I produced.
Okay.
And this was something where it was a large scale commercial. We definitely had the resources to match the execution. Eventually we just threw money at the problem, and it ended up being fine. But there was a lot of stress to get there. So we were shooting on the beach, and the DP wanted to be able to do a 1-shot along the beach, with also like an articulated arm. I mean, it was like, we had like the Russian arm that had could extend and do, remote head. I mean, this thing was like an alien moving around. The camera
could do the fancy stuff.
The fancy stuff, the very fancy, very expensive stuff with very expensive crew members that are associated with it, which of course we budgeted for. I'm always happy to pay people for their value and worth. I'm super pro union because I'm local 800, and because of that, my experience with that as a producer, I want to make sure that people are taken care of. So either by it being a union show, or if it's not a union show, at least making the rates match what they would get in union wages or benefits and so on and so forth. So we try to do our best. It just sometimes is, yeah, so we try to always do our best. But anyway, so we go out on a scout, and of course, the picture car driver comes on the scout, and to check out, you know, walk around the sand. We show them exactly where we're shooting. We go through all the steps, and I'm like, just, you know, I have a bit of like, especially with when I'm in the producer thing, I'm like always double checking things. I'm always like, are you sure this is going to work? You know, like you're promising me that when you get your little dune buggy with your articulating fancy arm, that this thing is going to drive on the sand. Right? It's going to it's going to do what it's supposed to do, right? He says, absolutely, of course, This gentleman was very, 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 very much in love with himself. He was really, 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 really just like, oh yeah, no doubt. Not like, there was not an ounce of like reason or like, well, you know, like normally you would hear someone be like, well, as long as the sand stays like this, or we do this and you know, they provide data. This guy was just, nope, it's going to work. I know what I'm doing. You know,
Full
like
confidence.
very much. Yeah, exactly. Just like, yeah. And of course, we get there a couple weeks later after the scout. We go and we're actually shooting. And we get the thing out onto the sand. And lo and behold, the thing does not drive on the sand, not even an inch.
Oh my gosh.
So we also have no other, like this thing has to work, right? Some way or another, this thing has to work. So of course we immediately are like, what can we do? We had other things that we could do to kind of, while we're problem solving this, we had other things that we could kind of do that would, you know, be, you know, like, so we weren't completely going to lose our day. And not make our day. So we started doing those other things, and we all kind of band together and try to come up with a solution. And of course, our solution is as well, plywood. Let's go buy a disgusting, obscene amount of plywood. And also, given we're at the beach, right? So that there's no Home Depot like right down the street. We're pretty close to the Palisades, so we go up into the Palisades, and in the Palisades there is a small, I can't even think of like what the small brand of, there's a small hardware store.
Okay.
They, of course, yeah, they're like, oh, we can get we don't have the wood here. We can get it. A truck has to come from another one of our store, Ace Hardware, that's what it is. Another Ace Hardware, another Ace Hardware has to send a truck with it over, you know, because we needed like 20, 30 pieces, I think. But the kicker is this wood, you know, it's a 4x8, right? So 4 feet wide, or sorry, 4x8. So it's, you know, 4 wide, 8 long, 4x8 piece of plywood. The wheels on the wheels are placed at like 8.5 feet apart from each other. So the way the wood isn't good enough. It's not wide enough for it to just go over the wood. So we had to, it took forever for them to get the wood from the other Ace location. And at this point I had sent a crew up to there and we're waiting. And I was like, at this point, like going nuts, anxious. So I drove up there and was like, what's going on? You know, like, and stood and waited with them until we got this truck drove up. And then we just started like hurling wood into our truck, just cross-loading it, which then finally got that. I mean, at that point, I think I was like, all right, let's go. You know, just completely out of breath, insane.
Little did you know you were signing up for some manual labor that day.
Right. Did not know that at all. And we get down there. Our lead person, a lead person is basically like the lead of the set dressers. They work directly under the set decorator. So they manage the set dressers. So, and they often do a lot of minor construction stuff if there's not like a full construction team. So she has to rip through with a saw 30 pieces of wood at a certain thing so that we can then get this wood onto the sand, which also, like, carrying anything on the sand is not great. We had a bunch of gators, like, you know, like off-road golf carts, basically, that would often get stuck in the sand as we would try to use them to get things places. So it was just like this like perfect like cacophony of just like problems happening. I mean, we had these big reach forklifts, 6,400-pound reach forklifts that had, because we had to create giant fly swatters to block the sun over this whole huge set piece for this one shot. I mean, this also was another one where you drove by it, you would think that they were shooting a Marvel film, like, or the Titanic or something. Like, it was just like, had a massive footprint, which to our own, we should have known better, and we should have just started off as a signatory with a union, and we did not. Lessons learned. And so the man who was responsible for driving this dune buggy called his union, and the union came down and instantly flipped us to a full IATSE signatory and Teamster signatory project, which was fine. I mean, ultimately, we had, like I said, we had the resources, so budgetarily we were fine. I'm also happy that those people got pension and health hours, you know. So ultimately not a bad thing, but I just thought it was so funny that this man who promised this great device would work, and yet we spent a good portion of the day dragging hand-cut pieces of wood onto the beach and laying out a track on the sand so that this thing could drive on the sand, you know, would be the one that would all of a sudden then flip us to a union production, which, like I said, I was perfectly fine with. We should have been a union production I don't think we ever realized how big this thing was going to be until it was already so big. And then we were like, yeah, it should have been a union production. This isn't independent filmmaking anymore. This needs the protections of a labor union. So I was happy that actually happened. But ultimately, we wrapped our day 5 minutes early.
That's surprising.
It was,
and you guys got the shots and everything turned out?
We got everything. It was beautiful. We won a bunch of awards for it, actually. So it was a massive success because it wasn't only just a commercial. We also did like a live influencer campaign bit with it, where the influencers could go and film their version of the commercial, and then a live broadcast as well onto Twitch and Twitter and stuff like that. So the whole it was more of like a whole kind of well-rounded campaign, and it was like massively successful. And so we won some ad sales awards and stuff like that.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
I'm glad your shit show turned out to be fruitful at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we started with my first shit show being not ending well. It did not end well for anyone. The second shit show ended well for some and not for others. And then the third shit show ended well for everyone. So
it's always nice to end on a happy note.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, thank you for talking with us today and sharing your crazy stories. I always love hearing them, whether we're on your couch or not. It's been great to talk to you today. Is there anything that you're working on right now that you want to share with people? Where can people find you?
Well, most of what I'm working on right now is pretty top secret, but I'm working with the Sphere. It's the largest spherical structure in the world in Las Vegas, and working on handling a lot of their stuff that goes on the exosphere, the outside part of it. So that's really cool, really exciting. And who knows what else is next. You can always find me on my website. It's my full name, alexanderchristianstamm.com. I need to update it again. I haven't updated it since January, and so much has happened in the past 10 months. So there's more to add to it. But yeah, anyone can reach me through that.
Thank you, Alex, so much. It was great talking to you. And with that, that's it for Shoot the Shit. Thanks for joining us.
Join us
Take
for the
care,
next shit show. Subscribe here for the full version of this episode.
And remember, if it gets tough on set, it will make for a great story.